So 3, 2, 1, let's go. So first of all, let's define it. Let's define a few things. First of all, maritime terrorism, which is going to be acts of violence or intimidation targeting maritime activity. We think that the ICC has established what constitutes maritime terrorism is, and we do think literally killing sailors constitutes maritime terrorism. I'm going to define prosecution as to institute legal proceedings against a person or organization. Notice how this isn't immediately throwing them into jail, but rather giving them a fair proceeding where they can talk to people from all around the world. This house is going to be in the International Criminal Court, as said by the motion, and this framework is going to be utilitarianism. This encompasses the whole world, and it's the only framework with objective evaluation and justification of actions, so we should default to it and use it in this round. Generally, the only way to make an international decision is to consider the effects on everyone and the specific magnitude of those effects. So here are just some general observations for this round. I'm going to have two. The first being that we don't think it's productive to pinpoint the motive of these mermaids. All the motion gives us is that, all the motion gives us is that this is an organized effort to control maritime trade routes. We do not know these trade routes. It could be anything. It could be constructed by these mermaids or constructed by humans. We do not know why they would want to control them. There's nothing indicated by the motion. We think it's counterproductive to weigh on what their efforts are insofar as they don't tell us. The motion does not say anything about it, and I don't think it's something that's productive or it's something that should pop up in this debate. Next, my second and last observation, we also think that this debate takes place in a world where mermaids are real, intelligent, and organized entities capable of coordinating complex actions. When you look at a mermaid, it is literally just like half human. We think that this would be effectively prosecuting them as human, and this is pretty fair. They have the same like cognitive thought of this as they are half human, and they did have like the cognitive function to organize this whole like organized crime thing to like control maritime whatever, right? Our first contention is going to be how this affects sailors. I have two subpoints out of this. The first being death. This is self-explanatory, right? You're killing sailors. This is an extremely important impact, and it's pretty intuitive. I don't think I really need to warrant it out any further. You're killing sailors, period. By prosecuting them, you're effectively allowing for like the deterrence of killing more sailors and putting a halt to the killing already done by the mermaids. My second subpoint under this is my second subpoint under my first contention is the psychological impacts. If you are a sailor and you see like, all your comrades or other sailors being murdered by mermaids, you're gonna feel pretty scared when you go out and do your job. It's gonna damage your psyche. It's gonna make you paranoid, and you're also gonna be pretty sad when like your close friends or coworkers dies. I think this is gonna be pretty damaging to sailors like psyches. It's gonna be pretty damaging to their like mental health, their psychological. When like a pretty like non-dangerous job is made into a job, you have to fear being like killed by some mermaid, right? Now onto my second intention, which is the maritime industry. I have two subpoints under this. The first being the mermaids have been damaging the industry. The motion says that they have been discovered to be killing sailors. That means they've been doing it in the past, and that means they've been killing valuable workers, as ship sailing and handling is a very hard skill to learn that needs lots of training. And they also lose valuable cargo, like if they're carrying a bunch of expensive spices or expensive metals or whatever other cargo that they're carrying had been lost because of these mermaids. And also expensive boats. I think boats are really, really expensive. They cost a lot to manufacture. And yeah, just three of those things are being lost and taken away from the maritime industry by the mermaids, which is a pretty big impact. And secondly, people are not going to want to be sailors. If people who want to be sailors or currently are sailors see mermaids killing sailors, do not want to get into a profession where mythical beasts are literally slaughtering you. No regional, rational person is going to see this job where like there's literal mermaids killing you, and they're like, "Hey, I want to do that. I want to sign up for that." No, they're not going to do that. It's going to take away sailors and workers from this industry. It's going to close down this industry, which is going to like lead to like first of all less jobs and also just less less power for the maritime industry. They're going to lose a lot of profit and stuff like that. And third contention, which is upholding international law. I have two subpoints under this. The first is why we should prosecute them. The mermaids are terroristic murderers. As indicated by the motion, the mermaids are killers and maritime terrorists. They aren't doing it in self-defense, and they're instead doing it to control trade routes, although through some like sort of organized crime effort. This is not a reason that justifies their murder. It isn't like self-defense, it isn't manslaughter. This is just straight up murder, right? These are murder terrorists that should be prosecuted, period, right? Furthermore, if we don't prosecute them, then I don't see any reason why the mermaids would ever stop. They are vicious and they're okay with taking lives, and they obviously seem to be very interested in controlling these trade routes for whatever reason, as they're literally killing people to do it, right? I don't see any reason if we like let them go free, they're gonna stop doing it. They're gonna keep on killing people and keep on trying to control these trade routes if they realize they can get away with it scot-free. And my second subpoint under my third contention is going to be a model for future governance. We think that the ICC has jurisdiction over crimes of global significance. Prosecutions like those of warlords in Africa or the architects of genocides have set critical precedents. As humanity encounters intelligent non-human species, legal frameworks must expand to include them. Prosecution under the ICC creates a precedent for accountability, ensuring that all actors abide by shared rules of engagement. Opposition has the unique burden to prove why we should not. And ultimately, Judge, just one thing I want you to think about is like what happens if we do not prosecute these sailors, these mermaids, right? First of all, as I said before, all of these impacts that I've already said are going to be flipped, right? More sailors are going to be killed. There's going to be more damage to the maritime industry. There's going to be less sailors, and we're not going to be upholding international law as much. These are all impacts that my opponents have a burden to disprove. So ultimately, Judge, I'm going to be yielding the rest of my time. Please cast a government ballot.
All right. Pipe. Let me set up my timer real quick. Okay. Okay, that's a little better. All right. Okay. Because there's so many people here, I'm going to assume everyone is ready. If not, please speak now. All right, I'm going to start my speech in three, two, one. Government's fatal flaw is that they frame this issue in an overly simplistic manner. They tell you we shouldn't care about mermaid motivations, but then provide the only answer given that definition, which excludes so many possible solutions, very proud to oppose. Three things I'll be doing in my speech today. First, going over some top of case, so like framework definitions. Secondly, going into one, two, three contentions on op side, finally going into refutations for their side. All right, so first we'll like to agree with their definitions of this house, the framework killing sailors, maritime terrorism, all their definitions are fine. We agree with the second point on their top of case. It takes place in a world where mermaids are real, but their first point, they tell you it is not productive to pinpoint the motive. Why is this inherently not true? We think that when you do not understand why an action is happening and you take no action to try to understand why an action is happening, it will continue to happen. You are giving the mermaids no actual reason to stop beyond this like quote unquote prosecution, which as I'll get into in my contentions is not actually going to be effective in any way, shape, or form. All right, let's move into our first contention, which is feasibility. Four layers of warranting here. I won't call them subpoints because they build upon each other. Yes, you can fiat through that the ICC prosecutes the mermaids, but you are not actually going to be able to implement any consequences for the mermaids on Gov's side. What does prosecuting usually look like in the status quo? Usually it's like one party takes the other party to court. This leads to my first layer of analysis. How is this possible with this motion? The bottom of a mermaid, by definition, is a fish. They're not going to be able to be on land in a traditional court. And we as humans are not going to be able to hold court or even be at the bottom of the ocean for an extended period of time. Second layer, there is no guarantee that the mermaids will even show up. Look to the status quo. There have been ICC warrants for arrest for people like Putin and Netanyahu, but all this means is that
Wait,
they cannot
POC.
travel to certain countries.
Yes.
Yeah,
My computer like froze for like the second analysis. So I had the first analysis on how it's like they won't be on land. They have like a different bottom half. I missed like the second part. Is it like okay if you repeat it?
yeah. The second is that there's no guarantee that the mermaids will show up. And then you didn't miss too much. I'll just go over that really quick. All right, I'll continue my time in three, two, one. As I was mentioning, in the status quo, there are ICC arrests out there for people like Putin, but all this means is that they can't travel to certain countries who would like enforce the warrant. Therefore, this action is meaningless. Insofar as the high seas exist, the land that the mermaids live in likely do not belong to individual countries, and therefore they can't actually be condemned. Sorry. Point three, it is impossible to actually punish them, even if they do show up, even if there is some way of holding court. Insofar as there are restrictions on the abilities of human deep sea travel, you're not actually going to be able to punish them in a meaningful way. GovSide provides no like mechanism for how this is going to work. You can't bomb the seas or anything like that. Therefore, no action can even be taken in the best case scenario. Point four, finally, even if you somehow bypass all of this, will the mermaids even accept the verdict. They live in a society on their own. There is no reason for them to care about the ICC of our species. Seeing as it is literally near impossible to actually achieve anything with this act of prosecution, you already can't access any of the benefits to like any of their contentions because none of this actually stops. Moving into contention 2, which is colonialism. We clearly see from the motion the mermaids are organized and working together, implying that they're intelligent creatures. GovSide already addresses this. They agree with this. This means that over the past thousands of years, as people have been sailing the oceans, we have been invading their natural home and using it for our own. If we looked at pop culture, mermaids are always depicted as an evil, destructive force that wants to destroy sailors. The beginnings of alienation and othering are already set in our earliest stories about the sea. So what do we have? We have a group people from which we're taking their land, their resources, and giving nothing back. We're polluting their territory, destroying it, and dumping trash in it. Why should we be surprised when they're fighting back? We have split up the seas into our own human division, claimed them as common use, but that common use excludes the very people that the oceans belong to, which are the mermaids. We are colonists on the ocean, destroying it with garbage and using it for our own gains, and then we prosecute its rightful owners when they protest. We view mermaids as evil and bad. How could they hope to reach an agreement with us? What they're doing is hurtful to us, but an act of desperation, because we're so close to killing them all via climate change, should not be the way to go. We, as the ICC, should not prosecute the mermaids because in doing so, we are acting as colonizers and just punishing the oppressed peoples because they had the audacity to stand up for themselves. Going into my contention 3, which is a permanent solution, 2 subpoints here. First of all, on exacerbating tension. These mermaids are obviously trying to control maritime trade routes for a reason, possibly because our trade routes interfere with their environment. Our pollution and waste is affecting their daily lives. Whatever the
Wait,
case, there's
POC,
some reason for their action. Yes.
is this on any specific sub-contention or is this just like a general overview?
Wait, could you repeat that? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, you just started your C3. Is this like an overview, like the analysis you just gave? Is it an overview or like under a specific sub-contention?
It's under exacerbates tension.
Okay, so C1, sub-contention 1 is exacerbates tension.
Yes. C3 sub 1.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem. All right, I'll continue my time in 3, 2, 1. When the only course of action you take is to prosecute the mermaids as criminals, you're not actually creating a solution to the problem. The mermaids are still going to be unhappy with whatever they were unhappy with before. Therefore, this problem will continue to happen because you cannot mechanize any punishment and you give them no reason to change. The impacts of this is that you're not able to address the root causes of why the mermaids are angry to begin with. Look to our contention 2. We still cause conflict and we get us that much closer to an all-out war with another culture. Let's move into our second subcontent, subpoint under this, which is equality. We think the fact that the motion says would prosecute the mermaids in general means you are prosecuting a whole race of people. Insofar that you buy that not every single mermaid is going to be luring sailors to their deaths. Think about the elderly, think about the children. It is incredibly unjust for the ICC to prosecute the mermaids as a whole. Already, on principle, this is the incorrect thing to do, but what are the impacts of this? On Gov's side, all mermaids are going to be seen as bad. This creates so many harmful future impacts. There's going to be tension, as I mentioned in my first subpoint. There's also going to be this like sense that it's like mermaids are our enemy. We're going to lead to war. There's so many bad impacts here, aside from the fact that it's inherently bad on equity. Now, let's go into refutations for their case. For contention 1, they say that this is going to affect sailors, but as I already warranted out under my case, more people are going to die if we go through with this prosecution. This prosecution is more likely to lead to more conflict, more violence, and be worse out overall. We outweigh on magnitude because of the fact that we're not only like not solving the problem, we're making the conflict worse. These mermaids are probably going to take more action against us when we're not only not doing anything about like their situation, but we're also actively making it worse by saying like, oh, these people are criminals, go like persecute them. On the second subpoint, kind of like the same rebuttal applies. You can cross-apply this to psychological impacts. On their second contention, the maritime industry, they say it's like doing it in the past, but look to the motion. It only says like right now. The motion also only talks about killing sailors, but like we can agree to their other points about like losing workers, cargo, whatever. So their second subpoint here, again, reference our contentions where we tell you that more violence and more death is going to happen on Gov's side. We outweigh on magnitude here. Contention 3 about upholding international law. This is just a principle contention that like doesn't really align with their framework. They tell you about like, oh, it's not self-defense, but like think about why they actually want to control these trade routes. It could very well be self-defense for many of the reasons that I mentioned before about like polluting their waters. There's many, many reasons. It is inherently their land, right? Humans don't live in the ocean. I would argue that any action they take, because of the fact that we are on the high seas, we are in their land, is probably self-defense. Their second subpoint here about being a model for future government, we agree that this principle is good, but it looks worse for the ICC, not only if they like try to prosecute someone and it literally does not work whatsoever, but also if they start a global war against a whole culture because of their warrants. I would argue this actually looks really bad for the ICC, considering that not only one, do they look like they can't do anything whatsoever, and they're trying to prosecute them to no real effect, but secondly, they are going to cause this like essentially like racism against the mermaids. They're going to start war, they're going to exacerbate conflict. All of these reasons, I don't think the ICC like should be doing this at all. With my last 30 seconds and Grace going over a quick recap of my case, sorry if I spoke really fast. Attention one, feasibility. We just tell you that like this prosecution is not going to lead to any like impacts whatsoever. The four layers of reasoning I give you. First of all, it's not possible. The mermaids can't be on land. Second of all, the mermaids won't show up. Third of all, it's impossible to punish them. Fourth of all, they probably won't accept the verdict. Second of all, on colonialism, it's like inherently bad that we're doing this to the mermaids in the first place. I would argue they very well had the right to fight back. And the fact that we're like simply saying like, oh, we're prosecuting you for fighting back doesn't reflect very well on us as humans. Finally, it's not a permanent solution. There's going to be more tension. There's going to be more racism. I would argue this just makes every problem in Gov world worse if they do persecute the mermaids. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. I will begin on my first word. Oh wait, before I start, is anyone like not ready? Okay, great. What is prosecution? We tell you what prosecution is in the PMC at top of case when we tell you that prosecution means to institute legal proceedings against. My partner tells you to notice how this doesn't mean immediately throwing them into jail, but rather giving them a fair proceeding where they can talk to people from all around the world. Fundamentally, opposition doesn't interact with them and kind of works under this assumption that we'll just be prosecuting them, not listening to them, and doing colonialism and stuff. Okay, why do I think prosecution is important? Fundamentally, because it gives the mermaids a place in court. It gives them a voice. When we don't prosecute them, when we kind of just keep on doing what we're doing right now in the status quo, which is what the opposition is fighting for, you see that we continue what we're doing, we continue our atrocities, and fundamentally, we have no perspective on what the mermaids actually want. Let's get into the case. So, on top of case, my partner gives you two main observations. First, on how it's counterproductive to pinpoint the motives of these mermaids, and two, that this debate takes place in a world where mermaids are real, intelligent, and almost humans. They agree with our second observation, but then they find a problem with our first observation, where they respond that we should say like we should take action to understand why this happens. Well, fundamentally, we tell you that prosecution is the only reason, is the only way through which we can actually understand why this happens. Because realize when we don't prosecute them, when we don't give them a fair place in court, all we do is continue our actions. Fundamentally, a court is where discourse happens. Look at our definition. And two, we can even look at the status quo. Look at Israel's prosecution by the ICC in the status quo. It's been so central to the discourse of the conflict. It's been so global. It's been so central. We think that prosecution is the only way for one, the courts to understand what the mermaids want, and two, for the world to understand what the mermaids want. Let's go into their case. Their first contention is on feasibility. They give four layers of warranting. All of them are wrong. First, they tell you that they won't be on land, that they have a bottom half, and we won't be able to prosecute them. Again, I think this like we can easily fix them. We can bring pools into like the courts. We can go to their land. Like fundamentally, this is never going to be a place where you're voting. Second, they tell you that there's no guarantee that they will show up to countries where the warrant is valid. However, again, I think they would. I think criminals go to their hearings because if they don't go to the hearings, if they can't represent themselves, all that results is just punishment. And then third, they tell you that it's impossible to punish them on deep sea travel. First, they never say why they live just in the deep sea. But two, we definitely have the sea weapons. We definitely have technology to go into the deep sea insofar as our maritime trade has been affecting them. Like, obviously, like our actions affect them to some extent. Fourth, they tell you, will they accept the verdict? Again, I don't think this question really matters. Like, if we find out they're violating rules within like their context, like we don't think it matters if like they'll accept the verdict or not. Okay. Their second contention is on colonialism, and they tell you that we have been invading their natural home. Okay, great. We can address this in prosecution. I think it's definitely maritime terrorism if we've been doing all these horrible things to the mermaids. But we think the only way to address this colonialism and the maritime terrorism on our part is to have the mermaids tell us what we've been doing. Fundamentally, when we don't bring them into the court, when we don't give them the place to speak internationally through the ICC, fundamentally, we don't understand what they're doing. Second, I'd like to say that the ICC isn't against violent resistance. I don't think they're for colonialism. Look at their work with South Africa. Look at their work with Israel right now, where they've been constantly voting against Israel. Fundamentally, I don't think the ICC is this big propagator of like colonialism. Fundamentally, I think that if they're committing maritime terrorism, if we've been committing maritime terrorism or any other crime, the ICC is going to act on it. Third, I think the mermaids should have thought about being diplomatic. And I think that fundamentally, that when the mermaids come to like the ICC, they have a voice. So this whole point on colonialism is just effectively refuted. Okay, their third contention is on permanent solutions. Their first sub-contention is on how it exacerbates tension. I think not listening to them, I think not hearing their voice exacerbates tension even more insofar as we don't even know what we're fighting about. We don't know each other. We don't know each other's truths. Fundamentally, this exacerbates tension when we're yelling at each other with no context. Their second subcontention is how it says mermaids in the motion and how you're going to be prosecuting the mermaid race. However, just like look at the motion. It's like the mermaids that are doing these crimes. I don't think they're gonna be prosecuting like all the mermaids. Just like read the motion again. I think they're gonna be prosecuting the mermaids that are doing these crimes. And second, I think that even if like we're prosecuting the mermaids as a whole, the ICC will resolve this. I don't think the ICC is keen on like prosecuting the entire race of people. This is resolved by discourse. Okay, let's go into how they respond to our contentions. Our first contention is on how this affects sailors. We give you two main sub-contentions. First, on death, you're killing sailors. Our verdict acts as a deterrence and puts a halt to the killing already done by mermaids. In response to this, they tell you that more people are going to die because you're making the conflict worse. However, again, this is just predicated on the assumption that prosecution means just throwing them in jail and just like punishing them. But fundamentally, that's not what prosecution means. It means a court hearing. It means discourse. That's not what it means. I think that in the absence of discourse, you have violence. Okay. And then our second sub-contention is on the psychological harms to sailors. They tell you to like cross-apply something, but they don't have any impacts on like the psychological thing of like the psychological situation of sailors. So fundamentally, what do we cross-apply? Okay, I think this claim still like flows through. Okay, our second contention is on the maritime industry. Our first sub-contention is that the mermaids have been damaging the industry. They kill sailors, like fundamentally they're damaging the industry. I don't read a response. Our second sub-contention is that people are not going to want to be sailors. If people who want to be sailors or currently are sailors see mermaids killing sailors, they're not going to want to be sailors. They kind of say that like more death is going to happen on our side as a general response to these 2 points. However, again, no, I think more death happens when you literally just don't listen to each other, when you don't have prosecution, when you don't give these people a voice. Okay, our third contention is on upholding international law. Our first sub-contention is on why we should prosecute them. We give you a pretty well-warranted thing on how they're killing people. This constitutes maritime terrorism. In response to this, they say it is their land, but fundamentally killing people is still bad. Like, sure, it is their land, but killing people is still bad. We think discourse is better at the end of the day. And again, we just want to say the ICC isn't fundamentally against violent resistance, but we kind of just have to learn more about this situation, which we can only do through prosecution. Our second sub-contention is on a model for future governance. We tell you that the ICC has jurisdiction over crimes of global significance. By persecuting them here, we're allowed to set precedent. In response to this, they say that we agree that setting precedent is good, setting a model for future governance is good. Great, they concede that. But then they say it's going to be bad to prosecute them. Again, they function under this wrong definition of what prosecution actually means. We're not throwing them into jail. We're not being violent against them. We're instituting legal proceedings against. We're not throwing them into jail. Rather, it's going to be a place for discourse. So because the government side has a better concept of what prosecution actually means, because we give these people a voice, it could not be a more obvious government ballot thing.
All right. Um, is everyone ready? I'm going to assume yes, because there are a lot of people. Let's see. I'm going to start my time now. The government is under the impression that prosecution is the only way to talk to other people, and this is very, very clearly false. There are so many other contexts, and there are much better alternatives that we can take as opposed to this prosecution. And I'm also going to warrant out why, when you do prosecute the mermaids, you get no other options for talking to them, or at least your options for discussing this and trying to find other solutions are greatly, greatly decreased. This notion of prosecuting all of these mermaids is just essentially a sham trial that is only to make ourselves feel better about it, and it doesn't really solve anything. It just perpetuates again our ideas that we should control the ocean. This is a crime against us because even though we're invading on their land, even though we're taking advantage of their resources, even though we're destroying their environment, we should have the right to do whatever we want here. Essentially, we as humans are invading their territory. We're using it for our own gain. This is essentially an act of war against the mermaids, and we're surprised when they fight back. Why is this even being considered to go to the ICC? This isn't a war crime. This isn't genocide. This is a part of a conflict between humans and mermaids that has been perpetuated over thousands of years, starting with stereotypes against mermaids of them being aggressive, vicious, always bloodthirsty, and deadly, and continuing with the pollution of the oceans, with maritime trade going over their land with little, like basically no acknowledgement that they're just using this land. Again, as we already point out, this claim that the seas are of common usage for humanity, while ignoring the mermaids completely here. This is just always so exclusionary and is just, again, colonialism. Why are we surprised when this happens? This is part of an already existing conflict. Again, there are so many better ways to talk about this issue, to solve this issue, than prosecution. We on the opposition side do not believe that prosecution just means throwing the
POI.
mermaids in jail, not at this time. What instead it means, yes, it means giving them a trial. But what does that trial mean? What does that trial signify? It signifies that we don't think of their claims as being valid. We think that the mermaids are acting as the aggressors, that they are unjustified, and that their crimes must be punished because we're trying to prosecute them. This is not how we go around trying to negotiate and find a solution. This is not how we actually try to make the world a better place for every party involved. Again, going back to utilitarianism, we want the best possible outcome for everyone, and that's just not possible in government's world. Getting briefly again into our contentions. I mean, yes, it's sure, mermaids can go on land, but why would they? Again, look to the status quo, where again, we have ICC warrants for like Putin or Netanyahu. Have they gone to the ICC to plead their case? No, of course not. They're just staying where they are and not doing anything because why would they? Why would they go risk being prosecuted? Why would they go risk getting accused and
POI.
convicted of crimes not at this time when they could just stay where they are and just not do anything? Why would they take that risk? Why would they even think about going there? And again, the same will apply, if not more, to mermaids. If you accept the status quo as fact, which I mean, it is, then mermaids won't do this either. And I mean, this idea of just mermaids showing up is just completely nonsensical. And again, even if they do, how are you going to punish them? Our points here are just that, look, the oceans are so large that we have a species that have barely explored them at all. How would you even find where they are? How would you even find them to prosecute them? What would prosecution look like? A genocide against them? Again, this motion literally says this House, as the International Court, would prosecute the mermaids for maritime terrorism. This does not say anything about only prosecuting the ones that lured sailors to their deaths. It doesn't say anything about picking and choosing which ones we want to prosecute. It says the mermaids. Do we want to go against and attack and hurt and try to kill an entire group and culture? No, of course not. We are the ICC. We're supposed to be against that inherently. And then they claim that the mermaid not accepting the verdict or not even caring about it doesn't matter. And again, this is just so wrong from a principle side of things about how again, we should care about what this culture feels and thinks about. And of course, because we want the best for the most amount of people, if we do actually think about what their side of this fight is, if we're thinking about why they're doing this, what we want, we can actually lead to much, much better solutions overall. Uh, on our second contention, they just say that prosecution solves it all and that mermaids can just go plead their case in a prosecutory setting in a legal court. This is just not how you conduct a negotiation. By putting it in this court, which, first of all, is human centered, human biased, cited around human conceptions of laws and maritime rules, because again, it is written into international law that the oceans are common territory. Do you think that any claims the mermaids have about this being their land would be recognized by the ICC? This is, again, as I already said, nothing but a sham trial. There is no positive outcome that can result from this. And again, the government just saying, oh, you can go talk to them about it doesn't mean anything. Look to the past, look to already colonialist examples. Has talking to the colonizers worked? Has it made them stop what they're doing and go away? No, of course not. Never. This has never worked in the past. Why would it work here when there's even more of an incentive for humans to try to solve this problem? Because if not, this would cause massive issues for the global trade network. Again, they live in a society on their own. There's no reason for them to care about an international criminal court of our species at all. The ICC is definitely not the way for them to have an international voice and does not help them at all. Then they just say the ICC doesn't propagate colonialism. I mean, our point here is that if we do go through this prosecution, this will happen and it will be colonialism. Now, on our contention three, again, they just kind of ignore the idea that we should even care about what the mermaids are fighting about and just claim that, oh, we should just prosecute them anyway and they can say what they want there. Again, this is just entirely ridiculous, as I've already warranted out why. Then they just tell us to read the motion again, and as I did, and I think it's pretty clear that it just says the mermaids. When you say the blanks as a group of people, it usually means that whole group of people. It never says anything about a specific group. And I think that if it did mean about a specific group, it would say this house would prosecute the mermaids who engage in these activities. However, it very clearly doesn't. Again, this is so wrong just from an equity perspective without even starting to think about whether we should do I mean, under our framework of utilitarianism, so therefore, we should definitely not prosecute these mermaids. Again, there are better solutions. There are better ways to talk. There are better contexts where we can have discussions and talk about what the right thing to do is to find a good solution, to find a better way to move forward that is actually good for more people. They bring up in their own contentions about how this is bad for, like in their first contention, how it's bad because killing people is bad and it causes psychological impacts. And yes, we agree. But again, not listening to the mermaids, not giving them, not letting them be heard, not just doing this in a context that's not a court. Because again, as I already established, doing this in a court, which is inherently already going to be biased against the mermaids, will not do anything and just only feels like a further aggression against them, will only cause more problems, will only cause this to happen more. And again, why should the mermaids even listen to the ICC verdict? Why won't they just continue to do this? On their second contention about the maritime industry and about this hurting maritime industry, again, the same warranting applies here. On government side, we get so much more violence, so much more aggression, so much more death and destruction because we didn't listen to this other group of people, because we didn't do this. And again, their third contention is just on the theory of doing so, where yes, holding up international law would be good if it actually applied to all of the parties. International law is built on human principles and excludes mermaids from even having a say because it claims that the oceans are not theirs to have. Generally, if you want to give actually the mermaids a good chance and a fair chance, strongly urge an opposition ballot.
Okay. All right. Okay. Is anyone not ready? All right, beautiful. I'm going to start my time in 3, 2, 1. Let's crystallize this debate in two main clashes. First of all, on which side of the house do we have a better chance of understanding the problem? At the top of Gov 1's speech, their first observation is that it is not productive to pinpoint the mermaid's motive. And then in Government Second, they turned this all around by saying that prosecution is now the best way to pinpoint the mermaid's motive and to understand their point. Insofar as you buy their top of case about how Gov themselves tell you this shouldn't matter, we win on this clash by default. But let's assume that you buy their Gov second instead, despite the fact that it contradicts their Gov first. The point that they push throughout Gov second is that prosecuting the mermaids through the ICC is the only way to let them have an international voice. Judge, is prosecuting someone the only way to have a conversation? Chances are this is going to be in the news. People are going to know about the mermaids and will be paying attention to the mermaids and their action. We can find the way to send the mermaids a message. We can send international representatives to meet with them. We can spell out what is your motive with shells on the beach. The list goes on. Having a conversation with the mermaids is not unique to government side. In fact, from the very beginning, government side actually says we should not have a conversation with them. There is no point in understanding their motive. You already vote op from the beginning of Gov's speech. Let's go into the second clash about side effects of prosecution. The only possible benefit that they tell you is that the verdict itself is deterrence, but they then give you no warranting of why this is true. I, in fact, already addressed this for my first contention in my fourth warrant. I tell you the Mermaid Society is not going to care about the International Criminal Court of our species. My second speaker already says this again. This also assumes a guilty verdict. Let's assume that, as they say, you're going to have like a fair trial. I'm going to get onto the why this is like incredibly unlikely as well. But like you're also assuming that you're going to have a guilty verdict when in fact there is a high chance you're actually going to have an innocent verdict. Look to my second contention and what we've been pushing about colonialism throughout our side of the house. So let's get into why this is actually not going to be a fair trial. What are the connotations of prosecution by the ICC, not just by any court, by the ICC specifically? The ICC prosecutes genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, the crime of aggression. These are perceived as bad things, and the people committing these actions, and in fact convicted of committing these actions, are perceived as bad people. So even if you bypass all of the warranting I give you in my first contention, you're still not going to have a fair trial because these people are already perceived as like worse than mass murderers. Their refutations to my third contention is just that not listening to them exacerbates tension even more. Again, this hinges on having no alternative to conversation on op side. This is entirely untrue. Therefore, flow everything on my third contention through, given that their only response is that like prosecution is the only way to talk or something ridiculous like that. In addition, the ICC assumes that the oceans are public property. Therefore, there is no legal claim for the mermaids. Note how I tell you about the high seas, which is waters that belong to no country. This trial is like quote unquote rigged to begin with. Now, what impacts are actually left standing after everything? Wash out their first and second contention insofar as there is no reason for these mermaids killing sailors to actually stop just because they're getting persecuted. It will not only continue to happen on both sides, it will be worse on government side of the house because of the connotations of persecution, because of the fact that on our side of the house, we have more tension, we have more racism. It is more likely that these mermaids will feel like they are being attacked for defending themselves. On the other hand, we actually solve the problem. Let's tie this back to utilitarianism. Both sides of the house want to like stop these mermaids from killing the sailors. But what is more likely? That the mermaids stop killing the sailors when we put them on trial for war crimes or when we actually have a conversation with them through other means? Insofar as you believe persecution is not the best method of conversation, we urge a strong vote for op side. Thank you.
Hello, Judge. Judges. I'm gonna be making my speech like mostly comprised of like just a bunch of voter issues. I'm gonna be speaking pretty fast. Is there anybody who like cannot stand fast speaking would like any of the judges who cannot stand fast speaking would like me to like not do that? Any objections? Great. So as I said, we're just gonna be doing the voter issues. Let's begin on 3, 2, 1. So, first voter issue, utilitarianism for the sailors. Sailors will be killed, they don't have any points on this, and they concede on it. We win on sailors. Secondly, utilitarianism in the maritime industry. Maritime industry is going to be harmed, they don't have any points on this, and they concede it. We win. Thirdly, should the mermaids be prosecuted? Yes, they're murderers. They need to be prosecuted in court. I think this is pretty like self-explanatory. We should be prosecuting these people because they have killed people. It's just like period. If somebody kills people and is a criminal, they need to be seen in a court of law. That's how the court of law works. Like this isn't really a debate, right? Next, fourthly, on their point about colonialism, they keep on trying to say we are perpetuators of colonialism, but realize that the ICC has literally resolved colonialism in the past. Judge, I'm sorry. The ICC does not have any preconceived notions of colonialism. They haven't proved why. This is completely nonsensical. They don't have any warranting. At the end of the day, what will a trial do? The trial is not a form of colonialism. It isn't a form of violence. It's literally just a trial where people sit down and state their case. At the very least, we think that getting to talk about their issues is good. In the absence of the trial, what do you get? You get violence that is completely baseless, where people don't know anything about the mermaids. I'm sorry, Judge, but the trial is not going to kill them, but not listening to them will. In the absence of the trial, all we get is infinite violence because we don't have the context of the mermaids. Fifthly, why is prosecuting the mermaids a net good? I think if you weigh the outcomes of prosecuting versus not prosecuting, you ultimately should prosecute. My opponent keeps on talking about how like we are oppressing the mermaids and they need a place to voice their opinions, but guess what they can do that? First of all, if we prosecute, the mermaids can speak their truth in a court, which is a huge impact. That provides solvency to all my opponent's points about how they're like victims, right? Next, we also have points about how sailors are harmed and how the maritime industry is harmed. And if we prosecute the mermaids, we stop all those bad impacts from happening and prevent any further harm. And my opponent's reasons are like the why it's not that good is firstly, like if we prosecute them, we'll become racist to them and it exasperates tension, right? This is outweighed. I think on magnitude, mermaids who are literal murderers, being seen as murderers is a pretty small impact, which happens on both sides. Regardless, people are going to be seeing them as murderers because they are murderers. People aren't going to like not hear about it if it's not in a prosecution trial. And like people's lives and like billions of dollars in the industry being lost, and also like mermaids not being able to have the voice to actually prevent people being racist is much bigger on magnitude, and we easily win on that. Next, on scope, both of our impacts say things about the mermaids, but we're the only side that has impacts and like benefits for the maritime industry and human sailors and humans, so we easily win on scope. Sixthly, why can we prosecute them? My opponent keeps on trying to say it's like infeasible to prosecute them, but come on, Judge. We live in 2024. We can figure things out. We can make a trial room with like a hot tub of water for the mermaids to chill in. They keep on trying to say like we can't go and like take the mermaids in for prosecution. This is untrue. We have scuba suits. We have harpoon guns. If they don't want to come in, we can take them by force if they don't agree to come willingly, just like how it works for humans in the status quo, right? They keep on saying that Putin stuff aren't actually coming to ICC courts and they don't do anything, and so like nothing happens. However, nobody does anything about Putin not coming because he's a crazy, powerful warlord who would just kill anybody who tried to bring him in on site. The mermaids cannot kill anybody on site. They don't have like huge militaries. Next, seventh, net benefits for the mermaids. There's two possibilities here, Judge. Firstly, the mermaids are bloody murderers that just want control, where we shouldn't care about the net benefits for the mermaids. However, or what the opposition is saying, which is that they're justified and most mermaids are good people. So let's wait under that one, right? They say that mermaids will be discriminated against and that we will be racist to them. But the thing is, it is the upside that like causes less of this, right? It causes more of this, right? Sorry. Without prosecution, the mermaids cannot offer their side of the story and will not be able to speak their minds on trying to stop people from being racist. However, on upside, the mermaids don't have any way to voice their opinions. Not to mention, if they aren't prosecuted, they'll keep killing people, right? And so then people will keep on hating them and viewing them racistly if they keep on killing people. In both worlds, people view mermaids as scum who kill humans, and they will find out. And however, they will find out about it. Sorry. And they will find out about it. Prosecution benefits them, the mermaids, by giving them a chance to speak their minds and also stops them from killing people and continuing to sour their image. Eighth, did we declare war on the mermaids by having like boats and stuff? No, we didn't know they existed. We just recently discovered them. We didn't know they were there. We aren't declaring war on them by having boats sail there. Ninth, will we be prosecuting all the mermaids? No. If someone comes to you as like in your school principal and they say a bunch of kids just threw chalk at a teacher, should we punish the kids? Is that a person asking if we should punish all kids? No, this is absurd. We're prosecuting the mermaids that killed people, not all mermaids. 10th, is the prosecution the only way to reach the world and speak the mermaids' truth? First, it is a way insofar that we give you reasons why the ICC is a great international platform. Opposition has to prove why we're uniquely bad, and they do not. Secondly, even if you don't buy what I say, why is going to court, realize that, first of all, going to the court gives them the unique chance to, prosecute the colonizer, and secondly, it gives them an international platform which they would never have, and thirdly, they're ultimately forced to come on the courts under the threat of prosecution. Right? Why they don't want to have a conversation with their colonizers, but under the threat of prosecution, they will have to. 11th, will it be a sham trial? No. I think if mythical creatures are found, people are going to want to actually evaluate them truly. If they're prosecuted, it's going to be fair, as literally all judges are trained to suspend judgment. You know what's going to be more bias? Random people who will protest and riot if we don't have this conversation in a safe vacuum such as a court, where people are trained to be unbiased. My opponent is randomly just saying judges are biased, which is not making sense. Other forms of discourse will have more bias. And I don't know what comes after 11. So finally, will we be genociding them? Obviously not. My opponents are saying this is like it's a complete baloney. We're gonna prosecute them, and my opponents like unwarrantedly randomly say we're gonna like mass genocide them all. This is completely baseless. Please do not buy this, right? Like we're not gonna be. We're sorry. We are not. We're just prosecuting them. We're not genociding them. That the genocide is what happens on their side when there's no actual good discourse. Thank you, Judge. Please cast a government ballot. Mermaids for life.
All right, thank you guys. That was a really silly motion.
That was a good round. Thank you.
Is everyone here?
My partner and I are here. I don't know if the other team is.
Gov, are you guys here?
We are here. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Victoria, do you want to announce?
Sure. First, I just want to congratulate both teams for making it to finals. Great job, both of you. The decision was a 3-0 for the opposition.
Okay, cool. I'll just quickly go first. This was a great debate. I vote op. I think one piece of terminal defense that op clearly extends is that prosecution makes it less likely mermaids will cooperate and stop killing sailors, especially since there's like no warrant for why a guilty verdict is a form of deterrence. So that means that talking to them is probably much more likely to get them to stop killing sailors because PMR concedes that the intentions of the killings matter. Like, for example, it could be like self-defense or like something like colonialism that's making them do the killing. So if we found a way to like trade without harming mermaids, we could probably stop the killings. This means ops sort of solves Gov's main argument of harming sailors and probably solves it better. So I think like top level, like you're probably not winning that you help sailors. That being said, like I vote on colonialism. I think it's probably true that prosecution will be biased and antagonistic, but will also lead to like unfair persecution of mermaids, especially since LOC tells me that humans are colonists of the ocean, which I thought was a bar. So we're probably like humans are probably the problem here. And the PMR is largely new in responding to the colonialism argument because the only MG response is that like there's going to be a fair trial and that we're going to hear them out. I think the only other PMR argument is that there's no discourse in ops world, which I don't really get a warrant for, and I don't really understand what the implication of the discourse argument is, especially in the context of like genocide. Overall, I think this was a good debate, super fun to judge. Congrats to both of you for making it to finals, and congrats to Op for winning the tournament.
Congratulations, guys. You guys did amazing.
You too. That was a really good round.
Great round, guys.
Yeah, great round, guys.
Okay, and then I can go next for RFD. Largely same thoughts. I think that the biggest push that Gov had on like against this colonialism argument or like helping the mermaids at all is like the discourse you get from prosecution. I think this argument is kind of overstated, especially because of what the LOR points out, which probably is new, but like is not actually called, so I end up floating it through, which is that like prosecution is always done with the intent of like a certain verdict, like with the intent of a guilty verdict, which means that this discourse isn't actually good. And like the stuff Shirley talked about how it sours discourse in the future. I also thought there was a about uh really interesting argument about how you can just like communicate with say with like communicate with the mermaids by like putting rocks on like the sand and stuff, which means that I think discourse can be like maybe this is like one example of one thing that could happen. I don't think like this alone is enough of a response, but I think this idea of how you can communicate in other ways probably solves back the discourse arguments, which means I'm not really willing to vote on the discourse clash. Then there's like the sailor stuff. I just don't think this matters nearly as much as like the colonialism stuff, which is like intuitively a much bigger impact and is actually weighed, whereas the sailor stuff is not weighed as much. And as Shruti said, if you solve the discourse stuff and you are able to actually like get on a good page with the sailor with the mermaids, maybe that like goes back and like fixes the sailor problems.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think both Shruti and Pranav are correct. I think that if the main solvency in this round is discourse, that doesn't give me a reason as to why um opposition cannot access discourse as to why like opposition's discourse is going to be bad in some way. I think as far that's true, then op just co-ops that mechanism and ultimately has access to the biggest impact in the round.
All right, thank you so much for the great RFT. Y'all
Yeah.
y'all are awesome. It was a great round.
Congratulations, guys.
All right, thank you.